Welcome to day one of the Build a Fundraising Strategy in 5 Days challenge. I'm so excited you're here because by the end of this challenge, you'll have a real actionable fundraising strategy, not just ideas, but a clear plan you can follow step by step. See, too many nonprofits operate in reactive mode when it comes to fundraising. They wait until funds are running low and then scramble to figure out how to raise money. But when you have a plan, you can move with confidence and avoid that consistent stress. That starts with knowing exactly what you're working toward. So today we're going to define your fundraising goal, not just the big number, but a breakdown that makes it easier to track, plan, and achieve. So step one, you're going to identify your total fundraising goal. So let's start with a big question. How much money do you actually need to raise? This might seem straightforward, but I've worked with hundreds of nonprofit founders who struggle to define the number. Many say, we just need more funding, but vague goals lead to vague results. And so ask yourself these questions. Number one, what does my nonprofit need to operate this year? Look at program costs, staffing, administrative needs, marketing, and emergency funds. Number two, are there any new programs or expansions planned? Will you need additional funding for that? Next, do you have existing funding commitments? If you already have grants or major donations pledged, factor that in. And last, what happens if you don't raise this money? What services or programs will be impacted? Now, if you already have a budget, use that as your starting point. You don't estimate based on past expenses and projected needs. And hint, you do need to go ahead and create that general operating budget while you're at it. So let's look at an example. So let's say your nonprofit helps low-income families access fresh food. Your budget shows that running your program for 1 year requires $75,000. That's your total fundraising goal. All right, so step two, break it down into manageable chunks. Now that you have your total goal, let's make it more achievable by breaking it into smaller targets. So think about your goal like a puzzle. Instead of trying to fit one giant piece, you'll put it together one section at a time. So how do you break down this big old goal? First, you're going to list your potential funding sources. These usually fall into a few categories. So maybe it's grants, if you're ready for them. This can be foundation, corporate, or government grants. Next are major donors. These are your high net worth individuals who give large gifts, or they can just simply be the top 10 or 20% of your givers. Major donors are who you define them to be. Next, we have recurring donations. These are your monthly givers. So if you have any of them, you'll include that. If you do fundraising events, galas, auctions, peer-to-peer campaigns, that kind of thing, you're going to look at those things too. You're going to look at corporate sponsorship. You're going to look at corporate sponsorships. And last, earned income. This could be merchandise sales, program fees, etc. All right, so let's look at an example to help you see it better. So let's say your total fundraising goal is $75,000. Instead of seeing that huge number and panicking, maybe you break it down like this. grants, $30,000, major gifts, $20,000, monthly donations, $10,000. And you came up with that by saying $25 a month from 34 people. Then maybe your events, you're expecting to get $10,000. And then sponsorships and earned income comes to $5,000. So now suddenly, this feels way more doable. All right, so drop in the comments what's one funding source you've already used successfully. I'd like to know. Okay, step 3, identify your funding sources. So now that we have the funding categories or strategies, now we're going to get specific. Where has your nonprofit successfully raised money before? This is a good place to find even more activities. So, where are there gaps? And then the last question you're going to ask is, what's an untapped funding source you could explore? So think of your funding like a table with multiple legs. If all your funding comes from one place, what happens if that leg breaks? So diversification is key here. So here's a common mistake. Many nonprofits rely too heavily on grants, but grants are unpredictable and come with restrictions. That's why having multiple funding sources gives you stability. So in the workbook, you have a worksheet exercise, but if you haven't done that, let's talk about a few action steps that you can do from this video. So first, list your top funding sources and how much you raised from each last year. Next, identify where you could expand or add new revenue streams. All right, and your bonus tip. If you're new and haven't raised much yet, start by focusing on building donor relationships before chasing grants. I love grants. They have a place in your fundraising, but only if you are ready and able to handle them. All right, let's move on to step 4. Make your goal SMART. So your fundraising goal should be more than just a number. It should be a SMART goal. So what is a SMART goal? It stands for specific. Define exactly how much you need and what it's for. Measurable. Track progress monthly or quarterly. Achievable. Make sure it's realistic based on your resources. Relevant. Connect it directly to your nonprofit's mission. And time-bound. Set a deadline. So an example of a SMART goal. Raise $75,000 by December 31st to support 500 families through our food assistance program. We'll do this through grants, $30K, major gifts, $20K, and monthly donations, $10K, with quarterly check-ins. All right, so notice how this goal is clear, it's focused, and it's very trackable. All right, it's your turn. What's your total fundraising goal for this year? Even if you're estimating, let's take a guess. I'd love to hear how much you need to raise. All right, let's move on now to step 5. Set your first milestone. So big fundraising goals can feel overwhelming. So let's set an immediate milestone, something you can work towards in the next 3 months. So an example, if your annual goal is $75,000, a solid first milestone might be secure $10,000 in major gifts by the end of next quarter. Or maybe it's recruit 10 new monthly donors giving at least $25 a month. See, This makes your goal feel real and immediate. Okay, here you can go to your workbook and work through this step. If you don't have the workbook, let's talk about some action steps that you can do right now. First, write down your total fundraising goal, then break it into funding categories or our strategies. The next thing is to identify gaps and opportunities. So, what would you like to do? What aren't you doing that you think could raise more money? And then last, you're going to set your first 3-month milestone. All right, that's it for day one. Now it's time to put this into action. So, if you are a standard or all access pass member, you have access to the entire workbook. So go ahead and download that and start working on that. If you are just following the video, go back and make sure you have all of the action steps we've talked about in this video done. And then share your total fundraising goal in the comments. And then last, set a first milestone for the next 3 months. All right, tomorrow we'll dive into mapping out your donor strategy so you know exactly who to reach out to and how to bring in more supporters. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you in day 2.